And now,
ladies and gentlemen,
please fasten your seatbelts.
Welcome to PreneurCast.
You know, business cards being swapped, beers being drunk.
Can I say a nasty word? Can I say procrastination?
With Pete Williams and Tom Kosher.
how well did that go down?
Talk about that entire thing in a very another rant and soapbox episode if you want to.
Visit us online at PreneurMarketing.com.
Hello, Dom. How are you?
Hello there, Mr. Peter. I'm very good, very good. Some very sad news overnight, though.
It was the passing of Steve Jobs. Very, very sad. He was an icon, as the book title says. Now, have you read the book, Icon?
Do you know what? I haven't. It's on my list.
It's interesting. It's very, very interesting.
Yeah, after starting to work with you, my book list has expanded almost exponentially.
I think it's obviously an unauthorized biography of the man, and it's really interesting. It kind of goes through how he sort of came back. The subtitle of the book is, I think, the greatest second act in the history of business. And sort of talks about his comeback to Apple and the reinvention of Apple when he came back after leaving and doing Pixar and all that sort of stuff. So it's really interesting. And the way you read it, there's sort of obviously a slight undertone that there's obviously a play on words almost in the title being icon, which is interesting. But no, very, very sad day. That he was a genius and did a lot for the world. And it's very sad. 56, I think he was when he passed away, and that's just terribly young.
It really made me think. It was 2 a.m. my time when I got the news, and it was one of those news stories that you just don't believe until you've read it on a reputable site, 3 or 4 different reputable sites in my case as I scrabbled around. But it really made me think, and what actually made me think was I posted on my personal Facebook page. In our industry, I'm sure, well, I hope by now, I'll come back to that in a minute, but I hope by now that a lot of people are using Apple devices in their day-to-day work. But I posted on my personal Facebook page, which is literally just my friends, people that I know from school or I've known for years or whatever. And pretty much none of those people are involved in the marketing, internet marketing industry. Very few of them actually work for themselves. Most of them work ordinary day-to-day jobs and probably are PC users. And so I thought carefully about what I wrote. And I put on there that a lot of people think that because their exposure is mostly PCs, a lot of people see me as an Apple fanboy. I'm always carrying some form of Apple device. I've even installed Apple on... for purely experimental purposes and not as a business or otherwise serious activity, but I have installed Apple on the Apple operating system on a device that wasn't made by Apple.
You have way too much time on your hands.
No, it was a necessity, honestly. Yeah, right. But seriously, I mean, I use these. Barely an hour of my waking day isn't spent using one of these devices, and it shows outwardly. People identify the brand with me, certainly within my friends. But I pointed out that Steve Jobs' legacy to the world isn't something as easily observed as, oh, he uses Apple computers. He's a strange person. He uses Apple computers. He's different to us. It's things like all the different iPods, iPhones, iPads, each one of those devices change the way that people do things. And even if you don't own an Apple computer, never have one, and have no interest in having one, those other devices will probably have touched your life somehow, or the knock-on effect of those devices. Things like the iPod legitimizing MP3 music.
Yep.
Before the
Absolutely.
iPod, it was weird esoteric hardware doing random stuff that people didn't understand, and a load of teenagers downloading dodgy music on Napster when it was illegal and so on.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, bang, there's this iconic device and a legitimate marketplace. And that changed an industry. Similarly, along comes the iPhone. And for all of the, I prefer Android, I prefer this, I prefer that, blah, I like my Crackberry, all the rest of that, the iPhone shook up an industry, absolutely tipped it on its head, for the better. I don't I don't say everybody should have an iPhone, but that device changed an industry. And iPads, again, created an industry, some people would say, with the idea of tablet computing. Yes, tablet computers have been around, but they just didn't really do what people thought they should do. And that's really how I wrote up my Facebook post, was that Steve Jobs and the company he created are getting us to the point where technology is starting to do the things that we think it should.
Absolutely. Well, but also, as a side note, don't forget that not only did he do all of that, he's also responsible for Woody, Buzz Lightyear, Wall-E, and all the Pixar cartoons that everyone loves. That's a whole other side of him that people often forget, that he was basically responsible for Pixar.
Absolutely instrumental in the I don't like to use the word commercialization, but he took John Lasseter's skill and creativity and actually made it into a real product that the world could see. I remember seeing John Lasseter's first animation on one of the early computer television TV shows that they used to have when computers were unusual objects, and so but they were still weird enough that they only showed the shows in the middle of the night.
That's when he was working for Lucasfilms back in those days?
I think actually he was, yeah, you're right. It was around that time, and he was experimenting with this idea of computer animation to actually make motion pictures. It was in the days before. Really, the only thing that had ever been done that you could call computer animation was Tron, and even that was actually just computer assisted. And he made this short little demo film, and I saw that. Wow, that's amazing! There's transparent things, and they look almost real and shiny objects and blah. And I was a little kid, and it was awesome. But it was one of those things that you just saw and thought, yeah, it's great, and it's on. We had a show in the UK called Tomorrow's World, and it was always these things that people had invented that you never actually saw.
Yeah, I think our version here was Beyond 2000.
Yeah.
Hosted by an Olympic sprinter, which was very, very strange.
Oh, ours were all hosted by people with like PhDs and things, and strange ties, Open University rejects, and but I remember seeing that, and then years later, Pixar just popped out of nowhere, and they'd made an entire feature film. And you're absolutely right, Steve Jobs and his vision brought us that company and that reality as well, and that again tipped an industry on its head. Pixar come out with Toy Story, and all of a sudden Sony DreamWorks pops up out of nowhere. We have all the other studios that have cropped up that have made some absolutely phenomenal films, feature films, out of computer animation. But again, it's these little things that, while you might not love the actual thing, like some of you might hate Toy Story, it might not appeal to you, but there may be some other feature computer animation that you think is great, and there's a part that the guy played in that.
Absolutely. So, as I tweeted today, in honour of Steve Jobs, I couldn't fly a flag at half-mast, so I worked with my MacBook Pro screen half-dimmed. But realistically, I think Seth Godin said it best today. He wrote what he referred to on his blog as a eulogy of action, and sort of talks about there's not much to say, blah blah blah. But Steve devoted his professional life to giving us the most powerful device ever available to an ordinary person. Everything in our world is different because of the devices you're reading this on. So what are you going to do with it? And I think that was a very, very powerful question if we sort of come back to last week's episode and tie it back in like we always seem to do here on PreneurCast, is tie episodes together. And it's a very prominent question is, Steve produced some of the best devices available, iPods, iPads, and obviously, in my opinion, the MacBook and the whole Mac operating system. So what are you going to do with it? Because it's such an easy tool to create stuff and even consume stuff on it. But so, now he's giving you these tools as his legacy. What are you going to do with it? How are you going to make the world better because of the platform he created that you can now stand on and create stuff with? So I thought it was a very, very fitting way to honour Steve Jobs, and Seth Godin always does great things when he puts words to paper.
He does, however few he puts, they're always incredibly well considered. Yes. And as a kind of a segue back into what we originally considered we were going to talk about this week, my tweet, after much thinking about this and much eulogies on Twitter, some people crafting a tweet is one of those things you sometimes you can spend hours trying to get 140 characters to say what you want. And I saw yours, thought it was very witty as usual, you being the sharp guy that you are. But to key into what you just said, and also what a lot of people have said, I tweeted out, thanks for making what we do not only possible, but easy and fun.
That's it.
Yeah. But I also said, and this is leading on to what we want to talk about, we won't miss you because you're with us every day. And to me, as I said, as an iDevice user, as a Mac user, that's absolutely true. There isn't a thing that I do for my business, and most of my leisure time, to be honest, that doesn't in some way involve a device that was inspired or made real by Steve Jobs. And a big part of that, as he segues neatly into the topic...
discreetly as well, so discreetly.
So discreetly. There are brakes screeching all over the world. A big part of that is consumption of information, because a big part of what I do is keeping up to date with an industry that moves and changes every second, and you are part of that as well, along with many other things that you're interested in, being the Renaissance guy that you are. And I really wanted to talk to you about that. I really am interested in how you consume as much as you do and still stay sane and sleep and have a life. And I have a feeling that the answer is going to involve an awful lot of I this and I that. But give me an overview. Give me an idea how you actually get this done.
Oh, that's such a broad topic and way to answer it. Well, I guess it's a range of things. I think most of it is based on the devices, the physical devices I use, I guess, to actually do various consumption, such as the iPad, primarily the iPhone, and also obviously my MacBook, which basically comes with me everywhere. I live on my MacBook. That's the platform that I use to consume stuff using cloud-based services. Now, let me try and put that in English for people who don't sort of get the technical side of stuff. Is basically I use a lot of services that allow me to access data or consume data across multiple platforms. So I've got, for example, Google Reader is a service that Google offers that basically pulls in all my RSS feeds from various websites that I want to subscribe to. And I can go into Google Reader and check that out, and it shows me when new blog posts or updates are made to a website. So rather than me having to go out and physically open up 25 different websites and read them and see if they've been changed and what's been updated, I can open up Google Reader, and it just gives me the snippets, fundamentally, the page titles for each of the new articles or blog posts that have been published on the various websites that I enjoy. And I can get through that very, very quickly. And we can delve into that workflow a little bit more if we want. But tools like the iPhone and the iPad allow me to access Google Reader no matter where I am. And because Google Reader is based on the cloud, it's always there and always up to date no matter which device I'm looking at it on, which is really, really good, because traditionally, and particularly with PCs still to a certain extent, it's hard to have one central repository for your information, whether you're creating stuff or consuming stuff that you can access remotely. So if I'm, gone to the chicken shop down the road from the office to get my lunch, which is I'm consuming a lot of chicken at the moment, obviously because of this Ironman training. So while I'll order my chicken and I'm waiting for them to make my roll and all that sort of stuff, I can whip out my iPhone and just quickly read through some of the new RSS feed highlights come into my Google Reader, and mark them all as read or unread or star them for later use. And when I go back to my MacBook later and open up Google Reader, those changes have been made there as well, which is really, really handy. So I really try to use services and the devices that make what I need to do very easy, if that makes sense.
It does. I mean, that's one of those big issues that I had when I first started to consume a lot of information from online sources, was this idea that I might look at I might get an email from somebody and I might go to look at their website, and I might look at that website on one computer, on my big office machine that I use day to day, then when I'm out of the office, I don't have that information. I can bring the email back up, but I don't have any notes that I made or anything like that. And certainly, I used to have one of the first desktop RSS readers, the tools that allow you to gather this information automatically from websites if they support it. But it was on the desktop again in the office. And I continually struggled with this, and I do still in some ways continually struggle with this idea of the movable information, that the information that I need is always with me. For example, I might be out and about and I might take a phone call from a client and they may want to know the status of a project or whatever, and rather than rely on my memory, having that information available is a big issue. But that's a separate topic really, and another entire podcast, I'm sure. But yeah, in this context, Google Reader as a centralized list of all the things that I'm interested in, all the sites that I'm interested in, what they've posted, and then also a repository of whether I've read it or not, whether I thought it was interesting or not, and some of the other tools that it gives me. I think it has made a huge difference to me as well. It's certainly got rid of a lot of that hassle and stress.
Yeah.
But you mentioned there a topic that I'm also interested in, which is where and when you consume this information. Because you talked about the being in the queue at the chicken shop, which a few years ago was a pretty radical concept, that you could do anything of any use other than make a phone call while you were away from a desk.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, for me, it's weird. I don't have a lot of downtime where I'm sort of sitting in a chicken shop or waiting to pick kids up from ballet or taekwondo that I know Jen Sheen was doing today, or maybe I don't know what else people do in their downtime. Because for me, like, I'm pretty much it's hard for me because I'm either up in the morning swimming or running or riding at the moment for the training, or I'm in the office doing various tasks that one does in an office, or I'm at home on the couch with Fleur, most likely have a laptop on my lap doing work anyway, or I'm in bed asleep. So there's not a lot of that sort of, I guess, I don't know what the term would be, but time that's historically been unusable, I guess is probably the unconcise way of putting it. Because like my office is literally 4 minutes from the house, so I don't have a long commute. So a lot of the consumption I do is audio-based consumption. So I listen to a lot of audio books. That's how I consume most of my books. I don't have a Kindle, and I've got the Kindle app and iBooks obviously on my iPhone and my iPad, but I haven't really got into that side of stuff yet because I don't have a lot of time to sit down and just read a book. So having said that, though, there's some really, really cool stuff with the Kindle they're doing from social aspect, where you can highlight certain elements of a book and then share that with followers, which is really, really cool. So if you want to get like the cliff notes of a book, and from people that get the cliff notes from not only the general populace but also people who think like you and would read a book with the same sort of framing, is a really good way to actually go to Kindle, and you can look at the section there where you can actually see the Kindle notes and read other people's notes. So you can subscribe to people like Ed Dale, Michelle McPherson, and a few other people sort of, in your particular space, wherever it might be, and I can see the books they're reading and what they think are important. So when they highlight a part of a Kindle book, I can get that. So I can not only listen to the audio version, but I can actually just go and read the cliff notes based on people who I trust and admire. So that makes it really, really easy to consume a whole book just reading the cliff notes, which is really, really cool. So that's a great little sort of consumption tip in just doing that. So I don't have a lot of downtime where I'm staying at a chicken shop or anything like that to do that consumption. So a lot of my consumption is, at the moment when I'm actually out and about training, running or riding through my iPod. So it's a lot of podcasts and a lot of audio books to do that sort of stuff. And when it comes to, I guess, physically reading stuff, I'm really trying to develop my speed reading skills. And there's some cool apps available on the iPhone and even some web-based apps that make speed reading very, very easy.
It is an interesting point that you make. I think you don't have what I would call downtime or unutilized time that that other people might pick up and say, hey, you know, I sit here, as you say, in a commute, or I'm here or there at any time. You're such an active person. You already utilise your time almost to the max. And what I find interesting is the fact that you're almost double utilising your time now. Because when you're out cycling, which is training for the triathlon, for the Ironman, sorry, you're also listening to some business book or other book of interest to you on your iPod. So that 2 hours that would otherwise just have that one purpose, a very laudable purpose, but it would just have the one purpose, you now have given it two. So you're plussing the entire concept. As you say, there are people... I read Jen's tweet this morning that she was... just morning for me anyway, that she was out with watching her children train in Taekwondo, and she was still joining in the conversation. And we regularly read tweets from other people about... Or read content created by people that while they were sat watching their children doing something, they're utilising the freedom that the ideal of the internet-based business gives them. But you really do take that way beyond. You've already filled that time up, and now you're using it kind of double time. I'm just a personal thing now, because when I've tried to do what you do when I'm doing something like exercise, which I find phenomenally boring and really difficult. Okay, I just want everybody to be clear on that. There are polar opposites here. Pete gets up at some ridiculous time in the morning, come rain, shine, or just hailstorms, gets on a bike or gets in the pool or what, and he goes for probably 2 hours a session.
Depends, anywhere from an hour to 6 hours, depending on what needs to be done at the time. But yeah,
he says in an offhand manner, anywhere from an hour to 6 hours. If I can stick any particular form of exercise for more than 5 minutes, I'm impressed. So we're pretty much polar opposites. But the one thing I have been doing recently, and maybe we will talk about this on another show, is that I've been cycling to the office, and that cool. Gives me you see. Secrets. It pales into insignificance by your efforts, but I actually do get off my backside, get it on a bike, and cycle to the office. And that gives me about a 20-minute to half an hour period each day, pretty regularly. And so I've started listening to things that otherwise would just sit there, because business books is one thing that I've listened to, just to get through that list that we put in the podcast all that time ago. But the other thing that I've started to do is take the audio from video-based training courses that I'm sure a lot of people have got. They've paid money and invested in this training course, and they've watched the first 4 or 5 videos, and then they've realised that actually this takes a long time to go through this stuff. And so I've taken the audio off of that, put it on my iPod, and while I'm cycling in the morning, I'm consuming, or in the morning and the afternoons, I'm consuming maybe 45 minutes to an hour of content every day from these courses. And maybe it's a review of the course, sometimes it's a new course, but sometimes it's a review just to refresh my memory about some of the bigger concepts. But that's great for me. It's giving me time back, in a way.
Well, let me ask you this about that. Are you listening to that stuff at 2-speed or 3-speed?
Here's tricky. Because I've got very old iPod Touch, if it's compatible, this gets very technical. If it's a genuine audiobook, there's the ability to listen to it at 2-speed on my iPod. Yep. There's a 2-speed button. If it's an audio file that I created, by default, you can only play it back at the speed it's played back at the speed you created it at. So at the moment, I'm actually stuck with listening to these things at 1 speed.
Yeah, well, there's some apps that I'm having developed at the moment which will sort of take care of that. So we won't go into depth about that now, but hopefully in the next soon period of time, there'll be some apps available on the Mac App Store, funnily enough, to tie it back to Mr. Steve Jobs, available where you can sort of pull in videos and rip the audio out and at extra speeds and that sort of stuff. So we'll announce that once it's all live and up and operational, which will be pretty soon, I think.
Awesome. So that would improve my workflow immediately. There's one tool that just allows me to take that video file, and it will not only strip the audio but give me it back in a different playback speed as well.
That is the idea.
Oh. So, yet again, Pete, the already busy man, manages to find time now to develop software.
I'm not coding it, don't worry, I don't get that wrong. I'm not going anywhere near the code for that thing. I have no idea. I could barely do HTML, but it's about, resourcing and outsourcing and that sort of stuff. But I'm a big believer in sort of trying to maximise your time. So by doing two things at once, and I'm using a really cool tool called eyercize.com, EYERCIZE.com, which is a really cool tool. That it's a little bookmarklet that allows you to highlight any text on a website and then click a button in your browser, and it then actually takes that text and puts it into a speed reading window that you can then say how fast you want the words to appear, and you can basically speed read it and learn to speed read with this tool. So you're learning, but also devouring written content at faster speeds as well, which is really, really cool. Completely free, no costs, no ads, nothing. It's an amazing free little tool. So check it out, eyercize.com. But I'm also pretty sure over at PreneurMarketing.com I did a video showing how this tool actually works. So if you're interested in something like that, I don't own it, got nothing to do with it. It's just a cool tool that I like, and there is no dollars to buy, pay, or give anywhere. But yeah, PreneurMarketing.com, and there in the last recent post somewhere there'll be a video walking you through how that works. That's a really cool little consumption trick that I use quite regularly to speed read stuff.
I remember when you did that review, actually, one of the videos I edited for you. But I remember that it's an awesome tool if written content, certainly online written content, is your thing, and also, as you say, it trains you in your speed reading. Speed reading is one of those things that I really, really need to get around to, because a lot of what I do consume is written. I've moved over to pretty much 100% digital consumption now. My iPad is my book, which has changed my travel habits, absolutely. I no longer have to sit down and choose which books I can carry by weight. I just dump them all on the iPad using either the iBook tool or the Kindle app. Big fan of the Kindle app for the very reasons that you mentioned earlier. But one of the things, here's a question, and this is a bit esoteric, but it's important to me. One of the things I find with the video content that I'm consuming by audio, I'm cycling along, I might be out for 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever, and I'm using it really as an awareness thing in the main, because as a training thing, I can't really get that all the information out of it, because a lot of people, when they design training, they don't really design it, let's face it, they create it by recording themselves talking to a group of people, as we talked about last week, and they very often say things like, over here and look at this.
Yeah.
Do you come across that?
Oh yeah, of course. It just comes down to knowing what you're consuming, I guess. You have to make sure if you're going to be consuming video content of how to use Photoshop, and it's a 3-part or a 20-part video series on how to use Photoshop. Let's think about it. You can't really listen to the audio of that because you can't see where the guy's clicking on the screen and what palette he's using and all that sort of stuff. So there's obviously time and place for certain stuff, and a lot of training generally is theoretical training. Even things like when you delve into stuff like, Jeff Walker's product launch formula, or any of those sort of, step-by-step trainings to actually, produce something or have a result, it's still very theoretical in its base. Even though there's a formula to it, it's still very theoretical. So that sort of stuff is something you can consume. Obviously, there's huge arguments for listening and participating, like active listening. So if you're actually listening to a training, whether it's theoretical or not, actually having your pen handy and doing the stuff we talk about or being taught, and actually sort of going through that process as the person's teaching it and taking notes, is huge benefits for that. But it just comes down to the time and effectiveness trade-off. And it's like, well, what's better, to spend an hour sitting down actively taking notes, or spending an hour going for a walk or going for a run or doing something active health-wise and consuming that hour of content? And then if you need to go back later, then you can sort of listen to that at even faster speeds, or cut back to where you need to actually take the action and do the action at a second point, because there's arguments saying that an hour of exercise a day will allow you to sleep 2 hours less because you're healthier, so you can invest those 2 hours elsewhere. So it's a good ROI of time if you sort of need to justify it that way, I guess.
Yeah, and one of the things that there are two big things that have changed my perspective on how I consume information. One of them was a reread of a book by Tony Buzan. Who is one of my all-time heroes.
I'm thinking about trying to enter the World Memory Championships next year.
Oh,
well, not world, just Melbourne-based, because the Walking with Einstein book I absolutely love it.
The Moonwalking with Einstein book, yeah, we talked about. I I've just read that on your recommendation, and yeah, I can see you doing that. That is very much something that. I don't. I have the worst. My short-term memory is so bad. I can't do mental arithmetic.
What'd you say?
I forget the numbers.
Oh, bang bang. Yeah. So, but yeah. Sorry. Continue.
But rereading the ironically book on speed reading. One of the tips that Tony Buzan talks about, not only for speed reading but just consumption in general of material, is this idea of having an overview first and then doing what he calls an in-view, and basically it's skimming the content to give your brain the place to put things when you go and actually find the detail within the content, and lets you skim over the irrelevant parts or the less relevant or less useful to you, less interesting parts. And a lot of it's based upon his speed reading techniques and consumption techniques. But by me listening to training content while I'm cycling or whatever, I'm getting that overview, whether it needs me to pay attention to a screen at some point or not. Even just having it on as I wander around. Well, I've also started doing it while I wash the pots, wash the dishes, in the house, and just having that awareness of what this entire course is about and all the key points and how they're presented, as you say, means that when I want to go back and review it, make good notes, I'm completely aware of the main points and the things that I think are relevant to me, without having sat down and sat staring at a screen for, in some cases, upwards of 4 or 8 hours. And that's something that I've always struggled with, is that initial time allocation to do the overview. I remember my first really monster information product that I started to consume was the Video Boss product by Andy Jenkins.
Yeah.
Which is a benchmark product. It's beyond awesome.
It is. It was. I think it was my pick for 2009 or 2010. Whenever I think
2010 awards. Yeah.
It was. Yeah.
Yeah. A truly awesome product. Not only from a content point of view, but from a scale point of view. The number of hours of content in that product are just insane. But the biggest problem, certainly for somebody who doesn't know anything about a subject, I consider myself as subject matter expert on the subject of video production and online media, and therefore I can look at a list of topics in there, if one exists, and I can go, hey, I'm really interested in that. That's probably new information for me. That's probably going to build on something I already know, and pretty much that topic over there is something that I already know or know I don't need to know. But as a complete beginner, you're pretty much dead set on starting at the beginning and going all the way through, so that you know what the words and terms mean. Then you find out what content's being put across, and then you finally work out whether it was any use to you or not. In some ridiculous period of time, it'd probably take you less time to watch the entire season, all seasons of Lost or something, than go through Video Boss. And it's a shame in a way. I think a lot of people miss out on some great content because some of these products have just got such scale to them. And so that, to me, this idea of even the 2-speed overview, just putting it on in the background, and every now and then something sticks out in my mind and maybe when I get off the bike at the other end, I make a scribbled note about something or whatever that I need to go back and review that. but it's in there. It goes in, and it gives you an awareness, and it just makes it easier to not only consume, but and the important thing for me is to learn.
Yep, couldn't agree more.
But I still aspire to your level of consumption.
Far from the best. But I think it's probably worth mentioning that people who have, I guess from a consumption perspective, I may as well do a pitch for something I do for free. How's that? I'll pitch something free. For those of you who have obviously who have subscribed to PreneurMarketing.com and downloaded a free copy of my book, and being part of the community, you probably receive an email that I send out generally every week, which is an email that I call Noise Reduction, which is basically an email I send out with sort of the top 7 or 8 interesting things I've found online. Because obviously, there's so much junk out there on the web, and particularly in the business and marketing space, there's so much stuff to consume and things like that, and it's often hard to remove all the noise that's available and find the stuff that's actually really valuable, that's actually worth reading. So I started this newsletter a while ago called Noise Reduction, which is just completely available for people who subscribe, and it's just every week I send out. Maybe it's the book of the week, maybe it might be a documentary of the week, plus 6 or 7 other links to various little applications or really interesting articles or tools or other interviews that I've found online that I think are worth consuming and are actually valuable. So if people are interested, head over to PreneurMarketing.com. Obviously sign up. You get a copy of the audiobook of How to Turn Your $1 Million Idea into Reality, the first book I wrote, and then just being on that list, you get that newsletter every week. So that's sort of one way that people can actually consume really cool stuff and eliminate all the noise. So yeah, noise reduction is that. And if you want to actually see, I guess for want of a better term, back issues, you can head over to www.noise.re/duction. That's noise.re/duction. So obviously it kind of spells noise reduction, but www.noise.re/duction, and that'll give you some of the back catalogue, so to speak, of the various other things that I've shared over a period of time through the newsletter.
And I actually wait for those, I have to say. We talk regularly, and you drop me notes about things that you find interesting or directly relevant to me or to us and what we do. But there is this new concept, or well, I say new concept. It's not really a new concept, but it's something that the technologies that are emerging now and that have been around for a while are really making more prevalent, which is this idea of curation. And that's what you're doing there, and that's something that I'm looking out for all the time now. I'm looking out for people like yourself, people that I resonate with, people that I share values with. And if by being on their list, what I get is curated content of things that I might not be aware of, but that I don't have to sit for hours and hours trolling through 100 websites because you've already done it. That to me is an amazing way to consume information. You're actually doing the consumption for me. You're working out what has value, and you're passing on just the bits that are relevant. It's like the old-fashioned news clipping service that some people used to subscribe to, where they would pay for people to read newspapers, clip out relevant articles, and put them together for them so that they only read things that were important or relevant to their business. And there are a couple of people that I'm on there. I have unsubscribed from pretty much everybody. Sorry to you if you're offended by the fact that I don't receive your emails anymore. I doubt that you are greatly, considering the absolute trash that's filled my inbox for the last few years. I can't imagine anybody cares that I'm not on their list anymore. But the ones that I'm stayed subscribed to are the ones where people are, and same with Twitter, by the way. My Twitter following is reduced and reduced and reduced because I'm looking for people that are curating for me. That's the value that people are adding now. People like yourself. Another guy that does this really well is a guy called Paul Colligan, who's very big in the new media space, and he curates new media stories about things like YouTube. Or online video or podcasting or things like that, and he's a great one to follow because once a week I get an email and it's got maybe 5 links, and I guarantee you that he's found something I wouldn't have seen. It might be an obscure YouTube video, a new piece of technology, and it's a bit like your emails. I learned about ISIs from you. I would never have come across that because I wouldn't even have thought to look for it. And just by being on your mailing list or knowing you, I'm getting to find out about these things without having to spend all that time looking in the first place. So what I consume is already being pre-optimized by being on those lists.
That's it. I like it. Oh, obviously I like it. I do it. I like your take on it.
It is a big thing, and this is something. I mean, just to go back to something I was talking about earlier. The two big things, two big shifts in what I'm doing right now in terms of consumption. One of them is that. One of them is looking for curators, looking for people that can tell me what to look at, and that's a very powerful position to be in. But it's all because it's so useful to people with the just unbelievable amount of information that's out there now. People need curators, and people are looking for them. And I'm really grateful that I found some great ones. But the other thing that I'm doing, back to that issue of consuming video-based content, for example, or instructional content, I'm moving away from actual hands-on instructional training for myself, because I'm also moving away from working in my business. Yep. And I'm now working on my business, so I'm consuming more content about business, about marketing, about leadership, about management, about all those topics. And they are absolutely ideal pieces of information to be consuming in all the ways that we've talked about. Because it's mostly conceptual. It's mostly ideas that are being put across. Even the copywriting stuff or the sales-based information, it's theoretical, it's conceptual, and it's ideal. And that's really changed what I consume and how I consume in and of itself. And in a way, that's a kind of a curation. It's a focus on the kind of information that I'm consuming within those contexts.
Yep. Well, speaking of, I guess, working on your business, you mentioned to me some really cool news about the whole 7 Levers stuff.
Crikey, I almost forgot, and I almost spat my tea out there as well. We have had such awesome feedback about that 7 Levers episode. It must be one of the most popular episodes, and it's the one I get personal, direct feedback from people. Bear in mind, we have hundreds of subscribers to the podcast, and we get amazing
more than hundreds.
Come
on, more than hundreds.
I'm being modest. I could big it up in an internet marketing style and go millions.
Well, but I think looking at, hang on, let me go to iTunes. Where are we sitting?
While you do that, I'll keep talking. We've got a lot of subscribers to the podcast, and we get some great feedback on iTunes, which we'll talk about in a minute. But personally, the people that know me and that work in the same circles as I do, I have a few groups of people that I'm involved in regularly, and pretty much everybody that's involved in a business has come back to me and said that's listened to the podcast. Most of them do. Has said how fantastic the 7 Levers episode was, because at the end we said, go and before you do anything, measure your business in these ways. Measure these different aspects of your business. Get those numbers in front of yourself, and then go through the ideas that we talked about of improving or pulling the levers to improve each one a small amount. And so many people have come back and said, this is great. One guy came back and said, oh, I've had this website that's kind of over there. It's an online product sale site, and he got a commission check through from the site, first one he'd had in a while, and it reminded him that there are these things out there that were businesses in and of themselves that may need a little bit of attention. And he said to me, he said, I was lost. I didn't really know what to do, where to start looking to improve it. He said, and that exact day, I listened to the 7 Levers podcast, and he immediately wrote out the 7 Levers and took the metrics from that business again and wrote them down against it, and just identified areas that he could improve, and then came up with a strategy and a particular technique he was going to apply to the one he'd chosen. He said that was it. It was a focal point for him and for his business. And so many people have come back and said that. So this is on top of the great feedback that we've been getting on iTunes.
Very, very cool. Yeah, well, we're in the top 10 as usual, which is good. I think one of our like last week's episode is number 3 in the charts, looking at the moment. So, yeah, again, really appreciate all the listeners who are sort of getting great feedback and sending emails and all that sort of stuff. It's really, really cool. We really dig all that feedback and the iTunes reviews and stuff like that. But also, you mentioned to me that the 7 levers calculator idea that we threw out a couple of episodes back. We had a couple of people email us, and someone's actually been churning away at the tool.
Yeah, again, another conversation with a guy that I know. I have a pretty regular call with this guy. It's a little kind of a mini mastermind thing going, and he was one of the people that had said to me, "The 7 levers is a big issue. You know, it's really helped me." And I reminded him that we'd put out this challenge to the listeners to build an online calculator, and whoever did it, we would happily promote this tool, promote them and their skills and services and the tool, because we just thought it was a great, really useful thing. And he said, "Oh yeah, that'd be really good." And I mentioned I'd kind of had to play about with it, making a spreadsheet to do it and things like that. And the topic got changed and off we went. Anyway, about 5 or 6 hours later, I get an email from the guy, and he said, "Hey, check this out. It's like version 0.9." And he's pretty much there in terms of functionality, and so folks, coming to you soon will be an online version of the 7 levers calculator. You can put your numbers in and see what happens when you just pull that lever a little bit in any one of those aspects. I'm really excited about that. It's one of the things you have an idea and you kind of crowdsource it, and it actually works. It's great.
Very, very cool. Very, very cool. I'm excited to play with it. I haven't actually seen it yet. I've heard the rumblings, but I haven't actually been able to touch and feel it myself, so I'm very excited to play with it.
Yeah, ironically, you're not on the beta test list yet.
See, Steve Jobs wouldn't stand for that. His standards would not let Steve... Like, nothing could be alphaed, not even beaten. Alphaed at Apple without Steve Jobs getting his hands on it.
Well, you see, in this case, I'm the gatekeeper. I'm not letting it out until I'm happy with it.
You Wozniak, mate. Come on.
Oh, I get to be the beardy. Thanks. Thanks a lot. Just before we go, somebody pointed this out to me. We are immensely grateful for the feedback that we get in whatever format that we get it from. But the one that makes the most effect for us, in terms of recognition and also in terms of getting the message out, is comments on the iTunes store. Now, when we produce a podcast, we produce it as an iTunes podcast. We do also publish an RSS feed, which when I tweet it out and Pete tweets it out, I've started mentioning the RSS feed as well.
And there's a website coming. Yes, there is
a website coming. Honest, there is a website coming. We're going to archive all the episodes and all the show notes and everything on the website. Honest, we really are. We've just got quite a lot of other projects on at the moment. But at the moment, the big promotional tool for us and the way that we kind of measure how we're doing as a podcast is the iTunes Store comments. So what we want to ask you specifically, I'm going to implement a Pete thing here, folks. So you're seeing a real tip in action. I'm going to make an actual concrete call to action at the end of this episode. I'm going to ask listeners who have an iTunes account and therefore can do this to go to the iTunes Store. If you go to the iTunes Store and open iTunes Player on your computer, PC or Mac, doesn't matter, and go to the iTunes Store and search for our podcast, type in PreneurCast in the search box, you'll find us. Most times you'll actually find us on the front page of the Business New and Noteworthy, because we are. Haha, thank you. Search for PreneurCast and then scroll down below the episodes and add a comment, please. That's it. That's your little action for this week that we'd really like you to do.
How long does that take?
It's depending on the speed of your internet connection. a whole minute probably would pass from beginning to end.
Awesome. So we're asking for a minute of their time.
Yeah, we're asking, hopefully, all the episodes and all the tips and tricks that we've given you so far might have saved you a few minutes in your day, or improved your day, giving you those minutes back. We're asking you just to use one of them, just this once, and pop on to the iTunes store, search for PreneurCast, and drop us a comment. Positive or negative, all feedback is valuable. We, as Pete says regularly, we do this because we want to give you, the listeners, what you want to hear. So tell us what you want to hear. Tell us if you like what we do. Tell us if the 7 levers made a difference to you or your business. Tell us if we're going off track. Or in the case of one commenter, tell me if I'm repeating one particular phrase way too many times.
But yeah, again, always, feedback's welcome, suggestions, case studies, questions, all that sort of stuff. We try and get back to everyone's emails and tweets and stuff like that. So we really do care about you all. So thank you very, very much for making this so much fun every week for Dom and I. So I really do enjoy this.
And I do too. We are well over the usual time that we vaguely kind of try and stick to. But the extra time added at the front as a bit of a remembrance of Steve Jobs and what he has given to the world, and the tools and concepts that I think have changed the way that a lot of us work and live. I think it was worth that extra time. So thanks, Pete. Good one this week, and speak to you soon.
Ciao.
You've been enjoying another fine episode of PreneurCast with Pete Williams and Dom Gocher. Make sure to hang out with the boys online at www.preneurmarketing.com or drop them a line via PreneurCast@preneurgroup.com.